The first thing I remember is how still her hands were. Melissa always had a nervous tick, tapping her ring against the table, tracing the rim of a coffee cup with her pinky, something small and fidgety. But not that day. Her hands were calm, folded in front of her like the closing of a prayer. I sat across from her in a tan-walled mediation office just outside Fort Collins, Colorado, surrounded by potted plants that were too clean to be real and silence that stretched between each breath. It was spring, the kind that makes people believe in new beginnings. But I didn't smell anything new in the air, just the recycled chill of artificial peace. We had been married 11 years. She was the one who filed. She arrived with a lawyer in a suit that fit him like armor, one of those men who used words like leverage and exposure even in family court. He didn't look at me when he spoke. He looked at the paperwork. And when he did look up, it was with that deliberate blend of condescension and courtroom civility that only a man who's won before can afford. Melissa is seeking full residential custody of both children, he said, like he was announcing the weather. She will also retain primary decision-making in educational, medical, and spiritual matters. His voice was slick and confident, the cadence of someone who expected objections. I didn't offer any. Instead, I looked at Melissa. She looked good, leaner than she'd been in winter, her makeup sharp, her blouse crisp, the kind of precision that comes from months of planning. She'd been building to this. There was no hesitation in her eyes, no regret, just quiet certainty. She knew what she wanted. She expected to get it. She didn't smile yet, but there was something in the corner of her mouth, a suggestion, like she was bracing herself for victory. Her lawyer went on. She would also like to retain ownership of the family home at Glen Hollow, as well as exclusive access to the joint checking and savings accounts, and full rights to the shared business, assets, name, client lists, operating license, tax ID, all of it. He placed a folder on the table between us. Glossy tabs, color-coded sections. The room was silent except for the sound of Melissa adjusting her chair. It didn't creak, just slid, clean, like everything else about her now. I said, "Okay." No one moved. Melissa blinked once. That was the first crack. "Okay," her lawyer repeated, squinting slightly as if he'd misheard. "I said that's fine," I replied. "If that's what she wants." He cleared his throat. "You understand the implications of these concessions? You're surrendering full custody. You're signing over the home, business, and financial holdings. You'll have no access or decision-making authority going forward." I nodded. He pushed another document across the table. "Initial here, here, and here." Melissa leaned forward slightly, as if she was waiting for me to pause, to object, to argue. I didn't. I took the pen, clicked it once, and began to sign. It took less than 5 minutes to transfer ownership of the life I had built. The pen scratched the paper like a blade across skin. Each stroke carved something off of me, and I let it. Every time I handed something over, custody, property, rights, Melissa's body relaxed just a little more. At first, I thought she was hiding it well, but it became obvious after the third document. Her shoulders softened. Her breathing slowed. She had come in ready for war, and here I was, disarming myself before she even drew a weapon. She had rehearsed my resistance in her head. She'd counted on it. Counted on me begging for the house, for time with the kids, for my half of the business. She'd built her exit around my imagined refusal, around a courtroom fight that never happened. When it didn't come, she faltered. Her lawyer began to slow his speech. He looked unsure, like maybe this wasn't the performance he'd been promised. Melissa shifted in her seat again. This time, her fingers brushed the edge of her folder. Not fidgeting, more like steadying herself. "Are you sure you understand what you're giving up?" her lawyer asked again, voice losing some of its polish. I looked at him, then at her. "I understand." Melissa's eyes met mine for a second too long. There was confusion there, a flicker of something unspoken. She thought I was broken. She mistook silence for surrender. And I let her. The final agreement was a stack of papers thick enough to feel like a book, and thin enough to lose in a drawer forever. I signed it all. No delays, no changes, no demands. When I finished, I capped the pen, placed it on the table, and leaned back. Melissa watched me the way someone watches a puzzle they thought they'd solved, only to realize a piece was missing. The lawyer cleared his throat. We'll file these by end of day. You'll receive notice when the court finalizes the dissolution. I nodded once. He reached for the folder, gathering the signed documents. His movements were slower now, hesitant. Melissa didn't say anything, just sat there, lips slightly parted, like she wanted to speak but couldn't figure out what the words were. I stood. She followed suit almost on instinct, still watching me, still trying to figure out what game I was playing. I extended my hand to shake hers, but not out of kindness, just to see if she'd take it. She didn't. That told me more than any of the documents ever could. Outside the mediation office, the sun was too bright. It hurt my eyes. I stood for a long moment in the parking lot, letting the light press against my face, the heat settle into my skin. Felt like stepping out of a coffin, like walking free from something I hadn't realized was killing me. I didn't drive home. Not right away. I sat in my truck and stared at the courthouse for 15 minutes. Then I drove nowhere in particular. Took back roads. Let the dust roll up behind me like ghosts. That night, Melissa called our daughter to say everything had gone smoothly. That was the word she used. Smoothly. She didn't know what she had signed. She thought she had taken everything. She thought the silence meant she had won. She must have told someone. Her mother, maybe, or one of those friends she kept on a private message thread, the ones who called themselves strong women while comparing alimony figures like trading cards. Maybe she just told herself, each morning in the mirror, that she'd escaped something, that she'd outsmarted me, because the week after mediation, Melissa was radiant. It wasn't loud. She didn't flaunt it, but there was a new rhythm in her walk, a brighter shade in her lipstick. Her voice, when she answered the phone at the cafe or picked up the kids from school, carried a lilt that hadn't been there in years. Not happiness. Not quite. It was relief. She had gotten everything. The house in Glen Hollow with the slate driveway I poured myself, stone by stone. The business we registered in both our names but only hers on the website. The checking account I had loaded for over a decade, now drained of my signature. Full custody of the children I fed, clothed, and carried through flu seasons and midnight panic attacks. She had taken the family and left me the silence. And the world saw her as the survivor. She'd smile now at school events, offer tight, neutral hellos. We're working through things, she'd say to curious mothers in denim jackets. It was for the best. And me? I was a ghost with a driver's license. The day after the papers were signed, I returned to the office of the business I had built. I packed my things in 1 hour. 12 years of blueprints, invoices, trade show passes, notes scribbled in grease pencil on the back of fast food receipts. All of it boxed. No ceremony. No goodbye party. I dropped my keys on the receptionist's desk. She didn't know what to say. Her eyes flicked to the closed door of Melissa's new office, where my name had already been scraped off the glass. I walked out. No announcement. No resistance. Melissa assumed I'd left in shame. But shame was just the wrapping. Inside it was calculation. She thought I was broken because I didn't fight. She believed that by offering no resistance, I had accepted defeat. That I'd given up because I had nothing left to give. But she was wrong. There's a silence men learn when they've been too loud for too long. It's not surrender, it's study. And I had studied. Not just the tone of her voice or the cold grip of her hand when she passed the papers. I had studied the fine print, the margins, the things she didn't ask for because she assumed they didn't matter. Assumptions. They're the cracks in any victory. Melissa had walked into mediation with a list of demands and a manila folder. She had prepped for war, rehearsed speeches, hired professionals. She came with fire, and I answered with smoke. I gave her everything. Not out of weakness, out of precision. Because when a house is rotten at the foundation, you don't fight to keep the roof. You walk out and you light the match behind you. A week later, she started calling. Small things at first. Hey, I can't find the old tax forms. Do you know where they're stored? I need the password for the accounting software. You didn't leave it with the office manager. Did you deactivate the auto-renew on the contractor licenses? My answers were polite. Yes. Check the storage unit under your name. Passwords were handed over in the final packet. Maybe check again. Licenses? You'll need to renew those manually. Each response a closed door. Each door a room she assumed she still owned. She never raised her voice. Not then. Not yet. That came later. By the second week, the shine had started to wear off. The relief gave way to realization. Owning everything meant she now had to run everything. The business was no longer shared. The finances, no longer bolstered by my 20-hour workdays. The kids, no longer buffered by my presence when discipline was needed. She had the title, but not the engine. I knew it the day she tried to log into the payroll system and found her access restricted. She had retained the business in mediation, but the cloud-based infrastructure, the proprietary templates, the contracts coded with my developer logins, all listed under my name, and all, according to the clause on page 34 of the filing, technically outside the bounds of physical and financial assets. She hadn't understood what she signed, or rather, she hadn't cared. She thought I was being generous, or stupid, maybe both. The clause had been added in the final draft, buried between sections on liability indemnity and intellectual rights. Her lawyer hadn't flagged it. He was too busy celebrating their clean sweep of the big-ticket items. Melissa didn't even read it. She thought my silence was naivety, but it was clarity. The kind of clarity that comes when you spend sleepless nights budgeting not just dollars but dignity. I gave her the paper crown, but I kept the kingdom's keys. 2 months after the mediation, I was standing in line at a hardware store when my phone buzzed. Her name on the screen. Not missed call. Not a voicemail. A text. Call me. Now. I didn't. An hour later, another. Why is the payroll frozen? Clients are calling. What did you do? Then the call came. I answered this time. She didn't even say hello. You set me up, she hissed. I could hear the panic. Not anger, real fear. I didn't set you up, I replied calmly. You took everything you asked for. I just stopped holding it for you. You know damn well I don't have access to the back-end systems. I can't run any of this without your credentials. What am I supposed to do? I let the question hang, because that's the part she never thought through. The doing. The part that comes after the court date, after the signatures, after the victory lap. She'd won a house she couldn't repair, a business she couldn't run, and custody of children she barely knew how to quiet. You wanted full control, I said softly. This is what it looks like. She swore then. Loud, sharp. The kind of sound that draws looks in public places. I imagined her in her office, blinds half closed, hand pressed to her temple. You're not helping, she snapped. No, I said. I'm not. Then I hung up. The week after I signed everything away, I did something she didn't expect. I didn't fall apart. I didn't drink myself numb, or call old friends looking for sympathy, or sit in the driveway staring at the house that no longer belonged to me. I didn't spiral. I didn't lash out. I didn't even raise my voice. I moved. Quietly. I cleared my name from the utilities first: electric, gas, water, internet. I gave formal notice that I was no longer the party responsible for payment. Melissa would find out the hard way when the next bills arrived and saw her name alone, unshielded. I called the accountant, formally resigned from the business, transferred full ownership of the LLC, client contracts, debt, and all. The bank accounts were already hers, but the tax burden? That stayed. I let the government know that as of April 12th, I was no longer a co-owner of the Glen Hollow property. I even had the paperwork notarized at the same coffee shop where we used to argue about throw pillows. The barista looked at me like I was getting my passport stamped for a trip I wasn't coming back from. Melissa had expected resistance, but what I gave her was permission. And then I made the one move she'd never even considered. I filed a single-page document through our attorney. One clause buried in the back half of our agreement that she hadn't flagged. It stated plainly, that while she retained legal ownership of the business and all tied assets, I would be relieved of all future liabilities, debts, claims, or obligations stemming from its operation. It was the cost of my yes, and it was the clause that would gut her. In the weeks that followed, Melissa's life kept unraveling. Not in sudden explosions, but in small, steady failures. A domino here, a toppled account there. Clients complained about invoices. Vendors stopped returning her calls. Contractors requested final payments before accepting new jobs. She hadn't noticed the shifts. She didn't know that I had been the one greasing the wheels all these years, handling disputes, negotiating extensions, swallowing losses to keep appearances polished. Now she was on her own, and appearances crack quickly when there's no one left to guard the image. She tried to hire someone, some consultant with a beard and a checklist. He lasted 3 weeks, told her he needed autonomy, and when she refused to cede control, he left without even finishing the website audit. That was another thing she never learned. You can win a business in court. You can't win loyalty. The people who built with me had no interest in building with her. The kids called less often. It started with small delays, missed calls, short replies. Our daughter stopped texting back after 9 p.m. Our son became suddenly too busy to come to the phone. Melissa complained that they were growing distant. They spend more time in their rooms than with me, she said once on a call. I said nothing. I wasn't going to tell her that parenting without patience was like swimming without arms. That silence wasn't rebellion, it was retreat. They didn't hate her. They just didn't recognize her. She'd spent too long watching from the bleachers while I stood on the field, bandaging scrapes and answering nightmares. Now the field was empty. She had full custody, and no idea what to do with it. 2 months after the divorce was finalized, I received an envelope. It wasn't official, no return address, no court seal. Just my name written in her careful handwriting. Inside was a letter. Michael, I hope you'll at least read this. I didn't expect things to turn out this way. I thought I was doing what was best. For me, for the kids, for all of us. I thought maybe if I just had space, I could breathe again. But now everything feels heavier. The house is quiet in a way that doesn't feel peaceful. The business is falling behind, and I can't fix it. The kids are pulling away and I don't know how to reach them. I didn't realize how much you were holding up until it was gone. Until you were gone. I'm not asking for anything. I just wanted you to know that I see it now. All of it. What you carried. What you gave. What it cost. I'm sorry. Melissa. I didn't cry. I didn't write back. I folded the letter and placed it in the same drawer where I kept my copy of the divorce agreement, the notarized release from the business, and the deed transfer form for Glen Hollow. All the paper proof of what I had built, and what I had walked away from. 2 days later, she called again. This time I answered. I need help, she said. The words sounded foreign in her mouth. With the kids? The house? No, she whispered. The business. We're in the red. If I miss another month of payments, they'll come after the building. That's not my building anymore, I reminded her. Silence. Then, I know. But you know how it works. You built the systems, the contacts, the pipelines. Can you just help me get it back on track? She had taken everything, and now she wanted rescue. I leaned against the wall of my new apartment. The drywall here was thinner. The floor creaked. The windows whistled when the wind blew. It wasn't Glen Hollow, but it was mine. I can't help you, Melissa. You won't. No, I can't. I gave you everything you asked for. The business, the brand, the rights, the name. You wanted control. You have it. Her voice broke. I didn't think you'd really let go. That was the truest thing she'd said in months. She thought I'd keep orbiting. That I'd still prop up the house, the business, the image of a family. That my love for the kids would be a leash she could tug when the roof started caving. She never imagined I would step out of the frame completely. But I had. Because the cost of staying wasn't just money. It was dignity. It was peace. And I was done paying for someone else's version of both. I saw her once more, months later, at our daughter's school performance. I arrived early, took a seat in the back. She walked in 15 minutes late, flustered, Makeup rushed. The seat beside me stayed empty. After the show, the kids hugged me first. Melissa watched from a distance. She smiled when I looked at her. It wasn't cruel. But it wasn't warm either. It was the smile of someone who finally understood what they'd lost, when there was nothing left to take. She didn't scream when the house went into default. She didn't call. It was the children who told me, quietly, awkwardly. Our daughter mentioned it while staring at her shoes. They say we might have to move. I asked no questions. I didn't ask if she meant Melissa or the bank. I didn't ask if furniture had already been sold, or if the for sale sign I saw online had been authorized or just desperate. I knew. The house had been hollow since I left it. Foundations crack when the weight is redistributed to hands that never knew how to carry it. She'd stripped the home for victory, but she didn't know how to live in it. Now it was slipping through her fingers. I read the listing a week later. Same photographs. Same kitchen I'd installed tile in, knees aching. Same fireplace I'd restored with care, one brick at a time. Same backyard where I taught my son to ride without training wheels. All framed as spacious, modern, ideal for families. Ideal. Until the family was gone. The business collapsed before the holidays. It started with bounced invoices, then the tax liens, then the Better Business Bureau complaints. Melissa called me once, voice tight, clipped. I need to ask you something. I already knew what was coming. I've been told I might be personally liable for some of the debts. That's possible, I said, keeping my tone flat. There was a clause, she said carefully, in the agreement. Did you put it in? About indemnity? I did. You planned this, she whispered. No, I said. I protected myself. But you knew I wouldn't see it. No, I corrected. I knew you wouldn't look. Melissa had always been detail-oriented when it came to appearances. Presentation. First impressions. Her clothes were always curated, her social media polished. But she didn't read contracts. She skimmed. She assumed. She moved fast when she felt confident. She felt confident the day she walked into mediation. She didn't know the foundation was already gone. That when I said yes, it wasn't submission, it was closure. That I had already emptied myself of the need to be right. That I had already buried the marriage in the soft soil of long-dead respect. That I had already prepared for her to walk out holding a blueprint for a life she didn't know how to build. I never bragged, never gloated. What happened to her wasn't a triumph for me. It was just gravity. You let go of the scaffolding and the structure falls. She let go of me, and then watched the beams split one by one. She sold the house for less than it was worth. She tried to rebrand the business but couldn't get the domain released. I still owned the admin credentials. I didn't need them. I just didn't hand them over, because she never asked. Not once. She thought the world would keep handing her the things I used to give. But I had walked away. Fully. The kids came to stay with me more often. Started slow. A weekend here. A sick day there. Then long stretches where I'd find their laundry mixed with mine. Their shoes by my front door. No formal custody change. No legal filing. Just gravity again. Pulling them back toward the place where consistency still lived. I didn't ask for it. I didn't keep score. I just made sure the heat worked, the fridge was full, and the silence was gentle. Melissa sent texts sometimes. Are they okay? They're quiet. I feel like they hate me. I never confirmed or denied. I just answered simply. They're tired. The last real conversation we had was in the parking lot of a grocery store. She had pulled in beside me by accident. Didn't realize it was my truck until I stepped out. She looked different. Tired, thinner. Not broken. Just faded. We stood there in the cold, our breaths forming separate clouds. I didn't think you'd really leave, she said finally. I did. She nodded. I thought you'd come back. Eventually. That we'd find a way. There was never a we, I said. Not for a long time. She looked down. The wind picked up. Her hands stayed at her sides. No makeup. No armor. The kids don't talk to me. Give them time. They blame me. They don't need to, I said. You already do. That cut her. I saw it. But she didn't cry. She looked back at me, and for the first time in 2 years, I saw the woman I had once loved. Not the one who stood in court. Not the one who signed papers like they were surrender notes. But the real one. The tired, frightened, well-meaning one who had lost her way. I miss them, she said. I know. You really meant it. When you said yes. You weren't giving me everything. You were giving me up. Yes. Did I deserve that? She didn't ask with spite. It was a genuine question. I thought for a long time before answering. I don't know what you deserved, I said. But I know what I did. I held a family together with everything I had. And when it broke, I let it go without breaking myself. She nodded again. Then she left. I stood in that parking lot long after her car pulled away. Cold wind, numb fingers, the smell of road salt and old snow. And for the first time since I signed those papers, I didn't feel like a man who lost his family. I felt like a man who survived it,